I stood frozen in the bridal suite of Lafayette's Mountain Haven venue, unable to move as my heart pounded like a drum inside my chest. Before me, flames curled and climbed up the delicate ivory satin of my wedding dress, the dress I had dreamed of for years and spent half a year creating with careful stitches, fittings, and endless patience. Now it lay in ruins on the polished oak floor, smoke rising from the charred fabric. And standing in front of me was Rachel Hunter, my soon-to-be mother-in-law. Her manicured fingers still clutched the lighter that had ended months of work in just seconds. Her face carried no guilt, only pride. Her eyes gleamed with the kind of cold victory I had only seen in her cutting remarks over the past year. With a sharp, shrill voice, she announced, "Now you can't marry my son. Paul deserves someone from our world, not some small-town girl who thinks a community college degree makes her special." Her words stabbed deeper than the smoke stinging my eyes. I am Janet Zarish, 29 years old, and I have never had anything handed to me. My life began in a trailer park in rural Louisiana, a place most people laugh about or try to forget. My mother died when I was 18, leaving me with nothing but determination and the will to survive. I worked 2 jobs through high school and college, designing logos for small cafes and local shops to pay tuition and rent. Every step of the way, I had to prove that I was worth something. When I met Paul, everything felt different. His warm smile, his big dreams of designing sustainable homes as an architect, and his gentle faith in me made me believe I had finally found a place to belong. With him, I didn't feel like the poor girl from a forgotten corner of the state. I felt seen, loved, and valued. But to Rachel Hunter, I would never be enough. For months, she had dressed her disdain in polite smiles and casual remarks, comments about my rough background, jokes about how impressive community college must have felt, and little reminders that her son was meant for more. I told myself I could endure it because Paul and I loved each other. But now, as I watched the smoke curl upward and smelled the sour scent of burned satin, I realized her dislike had grown into something far darker: open destruction. Behind me stood my 3 bridesmaids, Mary, Jennifer, and Patricia, in their sage green dresses. Their faces were pale, their hands clasped tight as they stared at the ruined gown. None of us spoke. The air was thick, heavy with the bitter smell of scorched fabric, and all I could hear was my own pulse thundering in my throat. But as the moment stretched, something inside me shifted. I had spent years fighting to prove myself, to rise above every obstacle, to silence every voice that said I was not good enough. And here I was again, facing one more person who wanted to strip me of everything I had built. Yet instead of breaking, I felt something steadier rise within me, a quiet, firm resolve. I turned to face her, forcing my voice to remain calm though my chest still shook. "Mrs. Hunter," I said clearly, "you've made a mistake." My hands trembled slightly as I reached into my clutch and pulled out my phone, but I refused to let her see fear on my face. My story was not going to end with a pile of ashes. Rachel laughed, but it wasn't a warm or kind laugh. It was sharp and brittle, bouncing against the high ceiling of the bridal suite like breaking glass. Her voice carried the same cruelty her words always did. "A mistake? No, Janet. I've saved Paul from you. Do you really think your little job at some small ad agency makes you good enough to be part of the Hunter family? Paul deserves someone from his world. Someone like Barbara Rush. Her father owns half the breweries in Lafayette. That's the kind of match Paul should have, not you." Her words should have broken me, but they didn't. I kept my eyes steady on her, saying nothing. My thumb had already pressed down on the button that opened the live stream app on my phone. I knew what I was doing, and for once, I didn't let her power shake me. Beside me, Mary, my best friend and maid of honor, moved quickly. She ran to the tall window and pushed it wide open. A cool mountain breeze rushed inside, carrying the scent of pine trees and fresh air. It swept out some of the heavy smoke that clung to the room, making it easier to breathe. The contrast between the clean mountain air and the bitter smell of burned fabric almost made me laugh at the irony. Outside, everything was fresh and alive. Inside, Rachel had tried to turn my wedding day into ashes. She swung her designer purse from one shoulder and gestured with dramatic motions, her bracelets jingling. "The wedding's off," she declared, her tone sharp and commanding. She flicked her hand like I was nothing, like I could be erased with a single wave. "I'll tell everyone you got cold feet. Paul will be upset, of course, but later he'll thank me for saving him." I tilted my head, my voice calm as I held my phone up for her to see. "Are you sure about that?" On the glowing screen, the live stream was running. The video showed the beautiful ceremony space outside, rows of white chairs lined neatly in the garden, guests sitting in quiet expectation, the floral arch sparkling in the afternoon sunlight. But the most important detail wasn't the view of the garden. It was the giant projection screen set up for Paul's grandparents in Miami and for my brother, who was watching all the way from Australia. That screen, visible to everyone outside, was showing this very room. And it was showing her. Rachel's face appeared on the screen, twisted with anger and pride, her voice loud and unmistakable as she declared me unworthy and boasted about Barbara Rush. Every single guest had seen her light the flames that destroyed my gown. Every single person had heard her call me a mistake. The color drained from her cheeks, leaving her skin pale. She froze, then stammered. "What? What is that?" I didn't blink. "The live stream," I said quietly but firmly. "It's been running for 26 minutes. Everyone saw you burn my dress. Everyone heard every word you just said." Her perfect composure cracked. Her lips trembled as she lurched forward, reaching for my phone. "Turn it off," she shrieked. Her long, manicured nails grazed my wrist, but before she could snatch it away, Mary stepped between us. Mary's eyes were steady and sharp, the way they always were behind her camera lens. "Mrs. Hunter," Mary said firmly, "everyone out there just saw you commit arson on a live stream. You might want to think very carefully about your next move." At that moment, my phone buzzed wildly in my hand. Notifications lit up the screen. Texts, calls, messages pouring in from shocked guests, all of them reacting to what they had just witnessed. Patricia, my quick-witted friend and bridesmaid, leaned closer and glanced at the screen. Her eyes widened. "Janet," she whispered, "it's Paul. He's on his way up." Panic flickered in Rachel's eyes. She looked around the room like a trapped animal, desperate for a way out. Her confidence was gone, replaced with frantic denial. "This isn't what it looks like," she blurted. Her voice was rising, breaking. I was just testing the fabric. Wedding dresses are supposed to be flame-resistant. That's all this was." But the truth was already out, and she knew it. From my phone, I could hear the noise of the crowd outside. The live stream had captured everything, and now it showed the guests' reactions. Someone had even moved the camera, sweeping it across the rows of shocked faces. Paul's father, Ryan, sat in the front row with a face like stone, showing no emotion but clearly shaken. Paul's best man, Jacob, had already leapt from his seat and was running toward the building. But what struck me most was Paul himself. He was no longer standing calmly at the altar. He was rushing up the aisle, his tuxedo jacket flying behind him, his face filled with anger and disbelief. I glanced down at what was left of my wedding dress. The delicate lace I had worked so hard for was gone, reduced to ashes scattered across the wooden floor. My heart hurt, not only for the ruined gown, but also for the dream it had carried. That dress was supposed to be part of the moment I had imagined ever since Paul proposed to me under the dogwood trees last spring. Losing it felt like losing a piece of that dream. Still, another part of me, the part that had learned to be practical from years of managing bills and deadlines at my ad agency job, began to take control. I turned to Jennifer, one of my bridesmaids and also my florist. "Jennifer," I said quickly, "what about that sample dress from Betty Tate's photo shoot last month? The one with the lace sleeves?" Jennifer's eyes lit up with sudden understanding. "The ivory sheath," she said, nodding. "It's at her boutique downtown. It fit you perfectly." Before I could answer, the door burst open. Paul stood there, his chest rising and falling fast as if he had run the whole way. His eyes moved from me, to his mother, and finally to the blackened pile of cloth on the floor. "Mom," he said, his voice low and sharp. "Tell me I didn't just see you burn Janet's dress while telling everyone she isn't good enough for us." Rachel's expression changed instantly. The anger that had twisted her face only minutes earlier was gone. She softened her features into a look of fake worry. "Sweetheart," she said gently, "you don't understand. I was only protecting you. She doesn't really love you. She just wants your inheritance. I had to test her." But Paul's jaw tightened, and his eyes burned with fury. "Stop lying," he snapped. "I heard everything." Then he turned to me. His expression softened, the storm fading in his gaze. "Janet," he said, his voice breaking slightly. "I'm so sorry. I never thought she would go this far." Carefully, I stepped over the ashes, my bare feet brushing the warm wood. I reached for Paul's hand, and he took it tightly in his. "It's just a dress," I said, though the words felt empty even as they left my lips. Because it wasn't just a dress. It was the symbol of the promise we were about to make, the symbol of our future together. Rachel had tried to destroy that symbol with fire and cruelty. But as I looked into Paul's eyes, filled with love and certainty, I realized something stronger. She could burn the gown, she could try to ruin the day, but she could never destroy what Paul and I had. We were stronger than her hatred, stronger than her sabotage. Ryan Hunter appeared in the doorway behind Paul. The calm, professional man I had always known now looked shaken, his face tight with anger. His silver hair caught the light from the window, but his eyes were dark with something I had never seen in him before. Pure disgust. "Rachel," he said, his voice low but sharp. "What have you done?" The question hung in the room, like the smoke that still lingered from the burned dress. Rachel's hands trembled, her earlier confidence slipping away. "Ryan, please," she began. "You know Barbara Rush's family would have been a better choice. They're part of Lafayette's history, part of its legacy. Not like Janet, who—" Ryan cut her off. His voice was cold, colder than the mountain wind outside. "Not like Janet? Janet built her career from nothing. She loves our son for who he is, not for what he has. You've gone too far this time, Rachel." My phone kept buzzing in my hand, messages popping up one after another from guests who had seen everything on the live stream. I caught a glimpse of one from my boss, Larry, at the ad agency. "This is insane. Are you okay?" I didn't reply. My focus had already shifted to Emily, the venue coordinator, who hovered nervously by the door. "Miss Zarish," she asked softly, "the guests are waiting. Should we make an announcement?" I looked at the blackened scraps of my gown on the floor, then at my bridesmaids, standing strong in their sage green dresses. The sight of them steadied me, reminding me why I had made it this far. An idea sparked in my mind, pushed by the same determination that had carried me through late nights, tight budgets, and hard years. "Tell them there's a slight delay," I said firmly. "But the ceremony will happen in 26 minutes. Rachel let out a sharp scoff. "In what, your slip? You can't possibly." "In my backup dress," I interrupted, keeping my voice calm and steady. Paul turned to me, his brow furrowing. "Backup dress?" he asked quietly. The truth was I didn't have one. But years of managing last-minute crises at work had taught me to think quickly and act with confidence. "Jennifer," I said, looking at my bridesmaid, "call Betty Tate. Ask if her sample dress from last month's shoot is available." Jennifer's eyes lit with understanding, and she was already dialing before I finished speaking. Ryan stepped forward, pulling his phone from his pocket. "I'll have my driver pick it up right now. Where's the boutique?" As he and Jennifer worked out the details, I turned back to Rachel. She stood frozen, her plan collapsing all around her. "You thought burning a dress would stop us?" I said, my voice low but strong. "After everything Paul and I have built together?" Her eyes narrowed, but she didn't answer. The weight of the live stream, her words and her actions broadcast to everyone, kept her in place. The next 26 minutes passed in a rush of movement and purpose. At Ryan's insistence, security escorted Rachel out of the suite. Her protests echoed down the hall until they faded into silence. Minutes later, Betty Tate arrived, her arms filled with not one, but 3 sample gowns from her boutique. The room burst into action. My bridesmaids moved quickly, turning the suite into a makeshift dressing room. Mary held up an ivory sheath gown with delicate lace sleeves. The fabric glowed in the afternoon light, a symbol of hope rising out of the ashes. "This one," Mary said, her voice firm and certain as she held up the gown. "It's perfect for you, Em." The venue seamstress, who had only been hired for small fixes, worked quickly with pins and fast stitches, shaping the dress so it fit my body as if it had been made for me. Jennifer adjusted a borrowed veil, her florist's hands steady and gentle as she smoothed it into place. Patricia, always quick with words, kept the room from sinking into silence. She joked about how we could pitch this whole disaster to my boss, Larry, as the greatest brand resilience campaign of all time. Her humor made us laugh, keeping the mood from breaking under the weight of the day. Through it all, I felt a surprising calm. It was like standing in the quiet of the Blue Ridge Mountains at dawn, still, clear, and strong. This wasn't the wedding I had imagined, but in a strange way, it felt more meaningful. It was becoming something real, something honest. Meanwhile, Paul had gone back to the ceremony space to speak to the guests. On my phone, the live stream was still running, and his voice carried through the speakers, steady and warm. "Today didn't go as planned," he told them. "But Janet and I believe marriage isn't about perfect moments. It's about facing the messy ones together." Applause erupted from the guests, the sound echoing through the stream. Their support washed over me, and I felt my throat tighten with emotion. I turned to the mirror. The dress was simpler than my original gown, but its clean lines and soft lace made it elegant in its own way. It felt right. It felt like me, strong, adaptable, and unshaken. "You're stunning, Em," Jennifer said softly, stepping back with a smile. A gentle knock sounded at the door. Ryan entered, his usual sternness replaced with warmth. His eyes softened as they rested on me. "Janet, you look radiant," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "I'm so sorry for what Rachel did. Her actions were unforgivable." "You don't need to apologize for her," I replied, meeting his gaze. "You didn't light the match." He nodded, relief flickering in his expression. "Paul's ready when you are," he added. Then he gave a small smile. "And your boss, Larry, is out there saying this is the best viral campaign Lafayette has ever seen." I laughed, the tension breaking for a moment. Of course Larry would find the silver lining in the chaos. Emily, the venue coordinator, appeared again, a spark in her eyes. "The live stream is still on. Do you want to keep it running?" I nodded as an idea came to me. "Yes. And can we project it inside the ceremony space? I want everyone to see the whole journey, not just the final walk." She grinned. "I'll make it happen." 15 minutes later, I walked down the garden path with Mary, Jennifer, and Patricia at my side. The Blue Ridge Mountains rose in the distance, a steady reminder of strength and beauty. The live stream followed us, broadcasting every step to the guests waiting inside. My heart raced, but not with fear. It beat with determination and pride. I was taking back this day, this moment. The borrowed dress felt light against me, its lace sleeves brushing the breeze, and I imagined my brother watching from across the world, cheering me on. As we reached the doors of the ceremony space, they opened wide. The guests erupted into applause, not the quiet murmur of a traditional wedding, but loud, joyful clapping. It was not reverence. It was celebration, a cheer for love that refused to be destroyed. At the altar, Paul's face lit up when he saw me. His eyes held nothing but love. "Ready to get married?" Paul asked as he took my hand. His voice was warm and steady, filled with certainty. "More ready than ever," I answered, giving his fingers a squeeze. The crowd grew quiet, their faces glowing with more than just wedding joy. There was admiration, respect, and a sense of unity. Ryan sat in the front row, his posture proud, though I noticed his eyes drift to the empty seat beside him where Rachel should have been. A small ache touched my heart for him, but it was drowned out by the strength of Paul's grip on my hand. Jessica Steen stepped forward, her calm presence filling the space. "Dearly beloved," she began, her voice clear and strong. "We are gathered here today not only to celebrate a wedding, but to honor love's endurance. Janet and Paul have faced a trial, and they have met it with grace and unity." Her words turned all the earlier chaos into something sacred. Tears filled my eyes, not from sadness, but from the deep feeling of being seen, supported, and loved. The ceremony felt alive, unplanned, and real. When it came time for the vows, Paul broke from the script. He held both my hands, his eyes locked on mine, and spoke straight from his heart. "Janet, I promise to stand by you, no matter who tries to tear us apart," he said, his voice strong though thick with emotion. "Even if that person is from my own family." The guests murmured softly, their approval spreading through the room. I felt warmth inside me, like sunlight breaking through clouds. Then it was my turn. I swallowed the lump in my throat and spoke. "Paul, I promise to face every storm with you. I promise to build a life where we are stronger together than any fire that tries to burn us down." My voice shook a little, but I meant every word. The weight of the day gave them a deeper truth. The crowd's quiet affirmations surrounded us like a shield. A brief panic passed through me when Paul reached for the rings. Rachel had been holding them before everything went wrong. But Ryan stepped forward and pulled a small velvet box from his pocket. "I grabbed these earlier," he said softly, "just in case." His thoughtfulness was a silent gift, and I squeezed his arm in thanks as he returned to his seat. Jessica Steen smiled. "By the power vested in me, I now pronounce you husband and wife." The room exploded in cheers. Paul and I walked back down the aisle, hand in hand, as the guests stood, their applause rising like a wave of support. Off to the side, I caught sight of Larry, my boss, recording on his phone with a wide grin. He mouthed, "This is gold, and gave me a thumbs up. I couldn't help but laugh, the heavy weight of the morning lifting with each step I took beside Paul. The reception in the ballroom felt electric, alive with celebration. It wasn't just a party, it was a festival of defiance and love. Someone had even created a Snapchat filter, a phoenix rising from ashes, with Janet and Paul written beneath it. Mary leaned toward me, her phone glowing. "You're trending locally with #LafayettePhoenix," she said, her eyes shining. I smiled, my heart full. Out of destruction, something even stronger had been born. People were already calling it the boldest wedding in Louisiana. The reception was alive with a warmth I hadn't expected. Guests who had first arrived in stiff clothes and polite formality, many of them Rachel's country club friends, had either slipped away quietly or softened. Those who stayed joined my friends and coworkers in giving toasts that felt real and heartfelt. Ryan moved through the crowd with ease, his charm as an attorney now mixed with something stronger, resolve. He thanked people for staying and made it clear without words that Rachel's absence was no loss to anyone. Paul watched him closely, pride shining in his eyes. "I've never seen Dad like this," Paul whispered. "He always let Mom control everything. But today, he's different." Larry appeared then, carrying 2 glasses of champagne and wearing his usual grin. "Ryan's handling this like a crisis PR pro," he said with a laugh. "And you, Janet, you're the story of the year. The local news is asking for a quote." Paul slid his arm around my waist and squeezed gently. "Tell them we're grateful for all the support," he said. "And that real love means facing obstacles together, not running from them." Later, during dinner, Paul's cousin Kimberly pulled us aside. "Not everyone in the family agrees with Aunt Rachel," she said firmly. "Most of us think she went way over the line. You've got us in your corner." Her words filled me with warmth. It reminded me that family isn't just about blood, it's about the people who choose to stand by you. The wedding photographer, who had originally been hired by Rachel, approached me carefully. "Mrs. Hunter, Janet," she corrected with a smile. "I've got some incredible shots from today. But about the dress incident. Some guests snapped photos. Do you want me to ask them to keep those private?" Paul and I looked at each other, and I shook my head. "No. Let it stay. It's part of our story now." My phone buzzed again. A notification showed a local news page had posted the clip of Rachel's outburst. It had already reached 28,560 views. The comment section was full of support, with strangers sharing their own stories of standing up to difficult in-laws. Reading their words made me feel less alone. As the night went on, I noticed Ryan speaking with relatives, his gestures sharp and filled with purpose. Later, Paul's aunt, Mary's mom, leaned toward me during a quiet moment. "Ryan's furious," she whispered. "Rachel's hiding out at her sister's place in New Orleans, saying she was only testing the fabric. But Ryan told her she's the one at risk of losing her position in the family business after this." Under the table, Paul's hand tightened around mine. "Dad's always been the quiet strength," he said softly. "Mom never saw it because he let her think she was in charge." The empty tables at the front, once reserved for Rachel's wealthy friends, were now filled with my co-workers from the agency. Their laughter and support stood in sharp contrast to the morning's chaos. When Paul and I took to the floor for our first dance, it felt like we were taking back the day for ourselves. His arm was steady around me as we swayed to a soft acoustic song. The warmth of the guests surrounded us, dissolving the last walls Rachel had tried to build. It wasn't the wedding we had planned. It was better because it was ours. Later, Emily guided us to the entrance of the ballroom, where a large frame stood. It was filled with handwritten notes from guests. At the top, the heading read, "Messages of love and resilience for Janet and Paul." Jennifer smiled proudly beside it. "We asked everyone to write something," she explained. I leaned closer, reading a few. My eyes filled with tears at words like, "You showed us what love can endure," and "Here's to rising stronger." The gesture touched me deeply. It felt as if Lafayette itself was lifting us up, the community stronger than any cruelty one person could try to bring. A week later, on our honeymoon at the Outer Banks, Paul and I sat on the deck of our small cottage. The sound of the Atlantic's waves rolled gently in the background as we scrolled through our phones. What had started as a small local news story about our wedding had grown into a national conversation about standing up to toxic family behavior. Messages poured in from strangers. Couples shared their own struggles with disapproving in-laws, thanking us for showing that love could rise above hate. Paul set down his phone. A message from Ryan glowed on his screen. "Mom's staying with Aunt Margaret in New Orleans," he said. "She's still telling her version of the story, but Dad says almost no one believes her anymore." I smiled faintly. Hard to spin the truth when everyone saw her waving a lighter and shouting, "You can't marry my son." Paul laughed, though his eyes stayed thoughtful. "Dad's different now," he said quietly. He told Mom that her actions made his choice clear. It's over unless she gets help. Just then, a text came in from Larry, full of excitement. 3 new clients want the Phoenix team for their campaigns. Also, are you 2 up for a crisis management panel when you're back? I showed Paul, who raised his eyebrow. "Only if you want to. We can keep this private if you'd rather," he said gently. I thought of the hundreds of messages we'd received from people who had lived stories like ours. Their pain, their courage, it all mirrored what we had gone through. "Maybe we can help," I said softly. It wasn't the wedding I pictured, but it's real. Like us. 4 months later, Paul and I arrived at the Lafayette Art Museum for the Hunter Foundation's annual gala. I wore an emerald green gown, another thoughtful gift from Betty Tate, that shimmered under the lights. It was our first big public appearance since the honeymoon, and my stomach tightened with nerves. Paul squeezed my hand. "Feeling okay?" he asked. I smoothed the skirt of my dress and nodded. "A little nervous, but we've faced worse." Ryan greeted us at the entrance, his face brighter than I had ever seen it. "Here they are, the couple who changed everything," he said warmly, pulling us into a hug. The gala felt different this year. Gone was Rachel's cold, rigid formality. Instead, the room buzzed with real connection. The guest list was filled with community leaders, artists, and local innovators, not the social climbers she had once surrounded herself with. Ryan led us to a display. It showcased the Foundation's New Phoenix Grants, a program created to support women rebuilding their lives after hardship. The logo featured a small phoenix rising from the flames, a subtle but powerful nod to our story. As I stood there with Paul's hand in mine, I realized the fire meant to destroy me had become the spark for something much bigger. "We've already funded 28 women," Ryan said, his voice full of pride. "Each one is starting over, just like you once did." A young woman walked up and introduced herself as one of the grant recipients. "Your wedding gave me the courage to leave a controlling relationship," she told me. "Now I'm starting my own bakery." Her words hit me deeply. It reminded me that our pain had grown into something larger than ourselves, something that could help others find freedom and hope. Later, out on the museum's terrace, Paul's phone buzzed with a text from Ryan. "Your mother is back in Lafayette. She's agreed to counseling if she wants any chance of being part of our lives. Proud of you both." I looked at Paul, searching his face for doubt. But instead of hesitation, he smiled and pulled me close. "Whatever comes next, we'll face it together," he said. "Like always." I leaned into him, the city lights twinkling below us. In that moment, I understood something clearly. Some flames destroy, but others create something unbreakable. To everyone who has followed our journey, thank you. You've walked with us through betrayal, resilience, and a love that refused to break. If our story has touched you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Celebrate the messy, beautiful truth of starting over. Keep building your own bonds, stronger and brighter, and I'll meet you where love rises from the ashes, stronger than before.